if someone's naturally really quick, that's what they're kind of going to be profiled as, whatever sport it is. That player is going to be known as a speed player. We need to let that strength be what they're known as.
Today, you are in for a treat. I have special guest Adam Pople, a highly experienced strength and conditioning coach who has a deep background in field sports and complex rehabilitation. So if you're an athlete, a parent of an athlete, recovering from injury, or simply looking to level up your performance, this episode is for you. Adam has worked across professional and semi-professional clubs, including time in the US college system. Currently, he leads strength and conditioning for A-League club Adelaide United. In addition, he works privately at the Australian Athletics Centre located in Findon, Adelaide. And there he supports athletes and adults going through rehab and performance training. So I highly recommend visiting there. Adam shares powerful insights on why it is important to train your strengths, and potentially training your strengths is even more important than addressing your weaknesses. He talks about the role of proper technique and how smart strength training can reduce the risk of overuse injuries, especially for athletes. Get ready for a value-packed conversation. Welcome, Adam, to the D8 Training Podcast. Well, how long have you been a strength and conditioning coach?
I did my first internship beginning in January 2014, and I think I've been accredited since it would be June 2014.
11 years.
Yeah, which it feels like every bit of that sometimes, and sometimes it feels like 5 minutes.
What's been the highlight?
I've been asked that question recently as well, and I struggled to pick it out then. Getting a chance to go back to Adelaide United this year was really cool. I really enjoyed that opportunity. I still am enjoying that. I've been really fortunate with what I've got to experience, so it's hard to pick out a singular highlight kind of thing.
Well, you have had quite a diverse career so far and a lot of experience. Is there any particular areas that you focus on with your clients or type of clients?
I really enjoy working with quite a range of people. So what I've always sort of thought of that I want to work with is people who are engaged in their training. I'm not too fussed about what their goals are specifically or whether they're a certain age or a certain professional athlete or anything like that. Those are fun to work with, but so are normal people as long as they really want to work on their training. I'm not too fussed as to the level per se.
What do you do to help them, achieve their goals?
The first thing I start with them is their goals and, okay, what is it that you really want to do? And if that might be body comp goals, it might be reaching the next level of athleticism. A lot of the time there's a money incentive to that next level as well. So what is it that they're lacking, and kind of how can we emphasize their strengths? Because especially with athletics or professional athletes, they're going to get paid on what they're really good at rather than what they can't do. So I think with those, we tend to emphasize their strengths. And for people who just want to live a healthy life, say those Gen Pop people, then it's more about what's holding you back currently, maybe what's causing you physical pain, or what is it that you can't do that you would like to be able to do again.
Okay. So you mentioned with the athletes you focus on their strengths. What about for Gen Pop? Would you focus on their strengths or would you look at balancing them out? How does that work?
A little bit more of both with them, because I find with Gen Pop clients, what their weakness are is typically causing them, say, physical pain, or it's limiting maybe their ability to play with their kids on the floor the way they want to, or play golf on the weekend. And it's recreational, but it's often a bigger mental piece for them to be able to return to those things. But then also focusing on their strengths helps them become really engaged in their training because they want to do whatever it is they're good at. So it's quite common, you might get a middle-aged man, Gen Pop client who's really strong naturally, but they're having some sort of pain in a rehab sense. So if we can focus on the areas that make them feel strong and capable, that'll flow over to the rest of their training as well.
So it's that bit of that combination.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then with the athletes, I would have thought that they would need to focus on their weaknesses. And when I say weaknesses, I mean like muscles that aren't so strong that need work on.
For sure, yeah. So when I say focus on their strengths, I'm probably more referring to if someone's naturally really quick, that's what they're kind of going to be profiled as, whatever sport it is. Let's say it's just footy. Then that player is going to be known as a speed player. We need to let that strength be what they're known as. But you're exactly right in terms of maybe they've got hamstrings that don't support that profile as well as they could. So then we'll bring the hamstrings or the whatever muscle group it is along to try and let them be that player.
So it's speed. If they're fast, okay, how can you get them to get faster? How can you get the endurance, continue
100%.
those bursts, as opposed to, all right, we're going to get you to start doing long distance.
Yeah, and I think that's something I see that I did early in my career that I've probably changed. I would go, oh, you're already quick, but you haven't got maybe the aerobic profile, and I'd focus too much on that. They're never going to be an elite aerobic athlete, but how can we emphasize the strength so that they're really being selected for that instead, where they can focus on what it is that they're good at?
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And not just in sports, but even with school. Like, if they're not good at something, if they're not good at maths, not going to go down that accounting bit, focus on what they are, whether it's creative, art.
For sure.
Now, sticking to the athletes, what's something that every athlete should include in strength training and why?
I think torso position, pelvic position is largely being lost, at least to the extent that it should be focused on. And when I say that, what I mean is a lot of people are so focused on the barbell number or the lift that they should be doing. People are very focused on exercise, I find. Like, we should do this exercise. And they should be chasing an adaptation. And sometimes we get so focused on a specific exercise or performing a certain weight in that exercise that how it's being done gets lost. So something like an ab wheel roll is quite trendy at the moment in terms of what you might see online. The Nordic especially is the same, but how it gets done then gets lost. And people rush to the goal rather than the process of how they got there. So I find one of the common themes across that with different exercises seems to be torso and pelvis positioning, and then we're getting into a lot of back problems, the flow-on effects to the hamstrings, those kind of problems. So I'd say focusing on being able to perform the movements we're trying to do with the torso positions that we need to be able to access.
So when you say torso position, what is that?
Rather than being, say, arched in the back or overly tucked, and you see both extremes. Some people are so concerned with not arching the back that they actually create the problem the other way. Some people, you see this really commonly with Nordics, they're arching their back right out and they're actually creating the movement that we're looking for, but with much more contribution from the low back than, say, the hamstrings when we're doing Nordics to develop hamstring strength.
So what can you do to ensure that your torso is in the right position?
If you've got a coach, that's something, say personally, I'm really big on focusing on with them. But if you're, say, people training on their own, which is a lot of people, that's where something like video footage or mirrors or something can come in handy, because then you can sort of monitor that as you go. Every individual is different, but doing what works for that individual. And if you're finding something like a Nordic is making your back sore, then that's a little bit of an indicator that maybe something position-wise is a little bit off.
We're big on form here as well, and it sounds like you are too. And sometimes it's even going heavier in weight, we find, and they're going lower, getting it done proper.
For sure, yeah.
But that hurts the ego. I even know personally.
I was going to say, I've been guilty of that for sure as well. And it takes a little bit of time, I think. And doing it wrong. Like, I got there in my own time because I did it wrong enough times that I don't like how that feels. And then I would slow down and kind of come back to what I think now.
Why do you believe athletes should do strength training?
I probably differ from a lot of coaches in that I don't necessarily think for most athletes, and I'll caveat that with most athletes, they're going to improve their sports performance directly by strength training. But they are massively going to improve their ability to tolerate high training loads and do more work by strength training. So my philosophy on it is that a soccer player or a footy player or a golfer or whichever sport you choose, they're going to have success in that based on their ability to play soccer or footy or golf. The best way to improve at those tasks is to practice those tasks. And if we can do the right strength training for the individual and that facilitates their ability to play more footy, golf or soccer, then we can really help them improve their technique that way. I think sometimes strength and conditioning can put the cart before the horse and try and make the strength training too similar to the sport, and it doesn't end up being effective strength training or effective sport training. If we can just make this facilitate more training at a good level, then that's how we can really help them move forward.
Would that help with injury prevention too?
Massively. Because so many of the injuries I'm seeing, especially at AAC, say, are related to the inability to tolerate the training they need to. So someone might be naturally really good, but then they get pushed into, say, they're 17, they get put into a senior team for the first time, They train 3 nights a week in soccer at that level. There's quite high training volumes. Then there's a fourth day of training because it's a game day. They're not able to tolerate that work and they break down because of overuse problems. And strength training is so powerful for helping prevent that.
That's something that I've noticed with many kids in their training. They're doing more than ever in the single sport. So using just soccer as the example, they tend to play club, which is 2 to 3 nights of training a week. Then they do academy twice a week, and then they play Saturday, Sundays. What are your thoughts on this level of sport-specific training, especially at a young age?
I think if we had the freedom to choose, we wouldn't choose that. I would prefer that they are exposed to more variable movement patterns than that. But I haven't yet found the solution to change the status quo in that sense. So I think we can try and positively impact maybe a suboptimal solution with things like very focused strength training. And it's hard to fit strength training with that because I'm working with a couple of athletes who have the exact timetable you just outlined. And some of them are playing school as well. And especially if they go to a school with, say, a soccer program, that school wants their piece as well because that helps their whatever it is. What I try and do with those athletes is just provide strength training that suits their calendar in where we place it in the week as much as what we do. It's both, because a good program depends on where it's put as well. Because if, say, AAC, where parents will bring them to me for a one-on-one session, if we're doing that session on Friday afternoon, the afternoon before 2 games on the weekend, the way we're going to go about that program is going to be very different than if we do it on a Monday where at least they're a long way from game performance kind of thing. So it depends. I just try and have an open dialogue with the parents and the athletes about how they feel, what it is that's working, what's not working, where they have space, where they need a break as well, because I think one of the challenges with this kind of single sport focus is where that athlete gets a mental break, and that's where we're seeing increased levels of athlete burn, sort of negative effects like that. How can we still let them enjoy it? Because as a percentage, overwhelmingly, they're probably not going to play professionally. So how can we have it so that this is maybe something they can enjoy for their whole life rather than stopping playing at 19 or 20 if they don't make the professional level and going, I'm so sick of football, I never want to play it again.
What's something that parents can do to help their young athletes?
If they're in that kind of schedule that we just talked about, I think some level of physical conditioning that's going to support that kind of workload is really big, because it's well documented, and I don't need to sort of bang the drum that kids are less active than they were however many years ago you want to look at. They've got progressively less active over a long time now. That means that when they suddenly try and play 6-7 days a week of whatever sport it is that they're playing, they're less equipped to just go straight into that. So things like strength and conditioning become more important to facilitate that. That doesn't mean they have to train with me or my equivalents. It just means that there has to be some attention paid to how they're going to perform that kind of workload and recover and have the conditioning to do so. Because once they're in the habit of doing it for a good period of time, they'll be well conditioned. But it's very common you see someone who's naturally talented, they might pick up a sport when they're 11 or 12, teams go, they're good, and then the school, the academy, and the club all want their piece, and then that kid gets thrown in the deep end 6 days a week, and that's when they have issues. I think as well there's a lot maybe of progress to be found in the way injuries are dealt with at local level. I think a lot of things are still going through GPs and being managed by people who don't have the skill set, because that's not what a GP's for.
What are some of the common reasons of injuries that you have seen, and is there ways that this could be prevented?
The biggest one I see is overuse style problems. That doesn't mean they've necessarily come about from being used lots. It's just that the amount of work they're trying to do is exceeding their current capacity. So a lot of you see shin splints, stress fractures or stress responses in bones, fatigue-related muscle injuries. I see that the most. Then you see often young athletes, especially where their power output exceeds maybe their control. So
when you say power output, what's that?
Naturally really fast athletes who haven't then developed their strength, especially in things like hamstrings and calves. And you see athletes ping hamstrings on game day or whatever type of training maybe because they're trying to go full out. And unfortunately that seems to find the best athletes because they have the capacity to be so fast or so powerful. Athletes like myself who were no good at that age and weren't powerful, I'm really small, then I never got hurt because I couldn't create enough force to hurt my own hamstrings or something, where it's always the talented ones that have that problem.
The ones that are talented, that are fast, that have that force, what do you recommend for them?
Usually strength and conditioning in some format. It doesn't, and like I said, that's not. It is partly a plug of come train with me, but it's also bigger than that. It's like even just have a structured, progressed program where we can develop those physical characteristics so that those talents they naturally have can be one furthered and then two can be more sustainable for them.
Yeah.
Because even if an athlete's not going to play professionally, the more they can do it, one, the more enjoyable that is. And there's a lot of other financial incentives playing at the semi-professional level or different things like that.
So I'm an athlete and I've injured myself. What is the best approach to rehab and where have you seen the best results?
That injury needs to be assessed as soon as possible. Now, if it's a sporting injury, which let's assume it is in the context of this conversation, you want a physio who is equipped to deal with that kind of problem, because there's lots of good physios out there, but physio is a broad area and different physios will specialise in different areas. That's not to say I believe they need to be, say, a sport titled physio, that's a whole different debate, but just a physio who knows what the demands of sport might be, whatever their title is. Once you've got assessment, then you can have a plan. But I see so many athletes, I've got this niggle, we work with a lot of baseball, my elbow hurts, but I'm still throwing, my hamstrings hurt, I'm still running. Those injuries can't heal until they're being addressed. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to stop playing, but we need to assess it, so we need to see what needs to be done first. So that's what I find the biggest thing is a lot of athletes are understandably kind of kicking the can down the road, but unfortunately that's not a solution to the problem. So it needs to be assessed and have an actual plan for how we can get it back to 100%.
I saw on your Instagram, so side note, if you want to follow Adam on his Instagram, it's at Pople Coaching. Is that right?
Pople, but yeah.
Pople, sorry.
That's okay. I've had a lot worse than that.
I'm glad I didn't do worse. Where you've said on the Instagram, avoiding training is not a valid rehab strategy. Why?
It just doesn't solve the problem. If something's become injured, there's a reason for that. And we need to address the why. So just avoiding training doesn't address what went wrong the first time, because every athlete I've ever worked with, their goal is to return at some point. Yeah. And if you just stop and then return, that's not going to work, because whatever was wrong the first time is still wrong. So it's common, you see this with ACLs, people go, oh, I've done my 12 months of time, but I haven't done a 12 months of rehab. I'm ready to go again, and it's a recipe for disaster.
I know with my daughter's gymnastics, she had a little bit of a niggle, so I gave her about 10 days off, which meant I didn't take her to gymnastics. And then when I took her back, the teachers were like, why didn't you bring her back in? And I was like, because she was sore. I didn't know. Whereas they go, we could have done other aspects in training to work around that. Can you walk us through how you approach training for someone that's mid-rehab versus someone that's in peak performance?
My first port of call would be to try and get first-hand access to the plan they're running, because I'm more than happy if someone's midway through their rehab, what they've done up to this point is really important in terms of what we then provide now. So ideally, whoever's running that rehab from the physio or the medical perspective, depending what it is, maybe a surgeon's involved, the more information you can have from everybody who's been involved in that process, the better. If it's an ACL, what type of graft, whether it went well, whether there's been ongoing problems really matters. If it's, say, a muscular grade 2 muscle strain kind of thing, then what we've done up to this point, where they're at with progressions, exercises, if they're running, what type of running they're doing. Just trying to have that full picture, because there's a lot of different places you might be at midway through. It might have gone unbelievably well, it might have gone unbelievably badly. And the more you can have that picture put together, the better. And then you can find them where they're at rather than trying to guess. That's where I find it goes wrong. So in private practice, trying to get hold of physios can be tough. And I think a lot of physios are understandably jaded, because unfortunately in fitness and strength and conditioning, there are a few cowboys out there that create a lot of noise on social media, and it can get a bad rap sometimes. So physios might think they just want to do more. Getting hold of them can be a struggle. But if you can create that dialogue, what you can do together is so much more impactful than what you can do on your own.
Look, personally too, I going to the gym and having that trainer, I'll do my rehab exercises and follow them, as opposed to I've got to do it at home. It's, I can't be bothered tonight, too busy.
That's the thing as well. And I think, like, personally, I always say to physios, I had a conversation with one recently who was excellent. And I said, tell me what you need done with such and such, and I'll make it happen. We'll put it in my program, and then we can put it at the front, the back, the middle, wherever you want it. You drive that, and then whatever we can do, other than that, we'll fit that in, but we'll prioritise that. And the physio on the phone kind of went, oh, okay. And I don't know if he's not had that conversation before, he didn't expect that conversation to go that way with me or what. Together, we can create a program that's exactly what the athlete needs, because he sees that athlete in one perspective and I see them in another. We get a better picture from that double lens rather than both of us trying to just shoehorn what it is that we're doing kind of thing. And again, I say that because I've done that badly in the past, where I've been driven by ego and gone, no, I know what I'm doing here. I want to run this. And I've got a physio that's butting heads with me because they're thinking the same thing. Where swallowing your ego a little bit, saying, no, I'll let them drive that process and then I'll fit in what I can around that. It goes better for everybody.
Definitely. And I think that's actually a good piece of advice for people going, hey, what you do find in your physio, your chiro, or whoever your professional is, talk to your trainer with them, help get them to incorporate it. And if they're not working together, reassess your team.
For sure, yeah.
So with parents, what do you see they get wrong with young athletes and what should they do instead?
We're unfortunately still very commonly hearing, I did this back in the day kind of thing. So there's still a lot of, I follow cricket quite closely and it's very common you hear, why are we doing that? When I played, we just bowled. Or, you know, with soccer, I'm sure Nevin hears this all the time. When I played, we just played. We didn't worry about all this fancy pants stuff. Yeah, that's okay, but that was also 40 years ago. So I think not understanding how much things have changed, and also that just because they've changed doesn't mean they're worse. I see a lot of sort of negativity around the change just because it's different from what it used to be. And I don't think that helps anybody. We're dealing with the current situation however we got here. I'd rather try and come up with a good solution rather than analysing whether it's better or worse than what it used to be 30 years ago. Who cares? It is what it is kind of thing. So,
yeah, that's a good point.
I will say though, I'm lucky, the parents I work with are really good, but it's self-selected group of parents that are willing to pay for strength and conditioning for their kids. So similar to you, you're probably dealing with parents who are a lot further down the line of being willing to listen to ideas like that, rather than ones that are maybe a bit more closed-minded and wouldn't come to a place like AAC or DA.
Definitely. And it has changed since, 20, 30 years ago. I know we had a Socceroo on the podcast, and that was one thing he said. He wishes he got into strength and conditioning training early. And when he broke into the A-League, he felt like he was so behind and he had to work extra hard just to catch up with that strength and conditioning. But his dad was of that mindset, well, we didn't do that, we just played. It's changing that mindset. And there's also been a lot of research which has now been debunked that strength training isn't good for kids.
It's funny you say that because I had a very deep conversation about that with a parent of one of our clients this week about, she's doing a similar journey to what Nevin did of changing careers and then coming into training. So she's really interested in a lot of the research backing it and that. And she said, what do you make of the conversation that strength training stunts their growth, or it's bad for them, it's bad for bone health, all of that? Because she said she'd had a conversation with another parent from school of, oh my God, your son strength trains kind of thing. And she was like, yeah, of course he does. Like, it's great for him. There's still a lot of that as well. And like you said, it's been thoroughly debunked, but things like that linger and they take a long time to sort of move on.
One thing I say is if you watch a child in the playground, so doing monkey bars, for example, they can go up and back, and then they lift themselves up. That's just chin-ups, that's strength. Or if they jump off the swing, it's a lot of force and weight.
And that landing is exponentially higher than the force they're going to have if they do a goblet squat.
100%.
So I think the human body can adapt to just about anything as long as it's progressively taken there rather than sort of shoehorned. And yeah, there's some videos online of people doing some wacky stuff, but those are dramatically outliers in my experience rather than the way most people are training children.
And if we look back probably to my grandparents' age, so what's that, 60, 70 years, 80 years ago, they were working on farms. Yeah. They were carrying potato sacks, which is just like lifting weights.
One of the strongest athletes I've ever met in my whole career was when I was working in America, and he showed up in his first year of university and could deadlift 600 pounds. And the strength coach went over to him and said, did you lift weights in high school? And he said, no, I've never lifted weights until I got here. But he did exactly that. He was a Midwest farm boy and had grew up moving hay bales and all of that. And that's resistance training, whether you think of it as that or not. And it's probably a lot more difficult resistance training than what we would typically perform in the gym. Hay bale weighs what it weighs. There's not the same degree of progressive overload of 1.25 kilo plates going on one by one kind of thing.
When you need to lift that and carry it, you've got to do it.
It weighs that, and it's got to get over there now.
Let's move on to a bit about mindset. So from your experience, what separates the athletes who make it from those who don't Is it physical, mental, or something else?
The way I think of it, and I'm not saying I'm right, this is how I conceptualize it, there's three components. There's the technical skills, the mental skills on the field, and then the mental skills off the field. I find in my career, the people with the technical skills, there's quite a lot of people who are technically good enough to play professionally. And if you see that with soccer, they can juggle, they can do tricks, they can pass the ball beautifully. Can they do that at game speed and make game decisions that are accurate enough? That's rarer than the technical skill in and of itself. But the people with the mental skills outside of who will do the things they need to do to live a professional life is probably, in my experience, the rarest one again. And then the players who have all three will play for Australia or, whoever. But I think that mindset piece that you're talking about is so rare, because I think there's a lot of, especially now, some of the money in sport is pretty crazy. There's a lot of glamour about what it is to be a footballer or a professional athlete in general. But I don't think what makes TV shows how hard that lifestyle actually is. I think people think you get to the front of the line at the club and you get flash cars and good-looking people around you, and it's a lot harder than that. And that's not the reality.
And you don't go to clubs. If you're a professional footballer, you might, maybe off-season or occasionally, but you're in bed at 10, 11 o'clock, especially if you've got games or training the next day. And
those little details don't go away. So it's not like you can make it and then skip them off. Those little details last a career. And I think the glamour stuff that people see is people who've had 10, 15, 20-year careers, but they've also made those decisions for the most part for 10, 15 and 20 years at a time. And there's a lot of things they've given up by the wayside. And when you're faced with that decision of, I want to eat that, I want to drink that, I want to go out, whatever it might be, it's a lot harder to say no than people realise.
Oh, completely.
And finding people who have that, especially consistency in making the correct decision, is really rare.
And it's a lonely life as well. We've had a few athletes on the show too, and they've said it takes that discipline, that saying no, and missing out on things, or making a choice. Their choice was because they want to compete at that high level, so they weren't going to parties.
Yeah.
So you work with Adelaide, the United club. What's the difference between someone playing that professional soccer mindset versus someone that hasn't broken in yet?
I think a lot of it sort of is what I just said is you could largely sum up as how bad do they want it, because I think what you tend to see around, say, A-League level or most levels is you just see the game day, and you might see a little bit of training on the news if you're looking for it, but you don't see the extra work that a lot of players are doing. And if those players are already there and you're trying to break into that level, you've got to catch them. So I see a certain set of the same players every day taking free kicks over mannequins, working on their shooting, working on their passing. And those are the same players that are going places, the ones that get so many A-League players dream of that move overseas. It's very much tied that the ones doing that are the ones that will do that in time, because that's what it takes to play at that level, where I think the players who say they want to make it but don't, lacking one of the three things we talked about. They either don't have the technical skill, the decision-making skill, or they don't have the drive to do those things consistently over time. And like I said, I think the lifestyle factors are probably the hardest one to find.
I think that applies to life as well, not just sports. It's what you do in private, you get rewarded for in public.
How often do you see it with diet or maybe lifestyle habits that aren't good for people, smoking, drinking, gambling, whatever? I know I'd be better off without this, but doing away with it is hard. It's way easier to have the beer or the donut or both or whatever it might be for the individual. But the people who say, I'm done with this, I'm going to stop, that's a fairly rare change to see someone grab and stick to.
And I know it's hard too. I enjoy a wine here and there. And then sometimes you're there and everyone's having a wine and you're like, well, I had one last week. I don't want one this week. Okay, I'm going to say no. And what I've learned is I say no, someone might make a comment, and then after 30 seconds it's over, but it's actually going into that 30 seconds of discomfort to say no and letting it pass. And
sometimes a rumination about that ahead of time of, oh, when I say no, they're going to say this. And part of that, there's a piece about surrounding yourself with people who aren't going to try and force feed you a wine or whatever it might be, but I think a lot of times the thinking about that is a lot worse. And if you just go, no thanks, I don't want it, and then people go, okay, whatever, and then kind of move on. This has been great. Thank you so much for all your insights and advice. So I've just started a new section. You're the first one doing it, called Rapid Fire. Okay. So it's 5 questions and just quick fire answers. So what's one book that every athlete should read? Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Oh, good book.
Good book. Favourite piece of equipment in the gym?
The barbell.
Most underrated recovery tool?
Normatex.
Is that the Normatex boots?
Compression pants.
An athlete you'd love to work with, dead or alive?
Muhammad Ali.
And favourite online fitness professional to follow?
Eric Cressy.
As I mentioned, this has been fantastic. If someone wants to follow you or work with you, how can they do that? Provide all the details.
You can find me on Instagram at Pople Coaching, and you can find our page to train with me or us at Australian Athletic Centre, and that's www.australianathleticcentre.com.au. And I think my LinkedIn handle is Pople Adam rather than Adam Pople. It's one of those two.
I'll put it all into the show notes and they can reach out to you. Now, if you could give every parent, coach and athlete in the room a message, what would you want them to hear?
Just let them play. I think people overcomplicate it so much. Just let them play and it'll come out.
I love the simplicity of that. And lucky last, what does dominate mean to you?
If it's important to you, you'll do it and all the associated tasks. So I think a lot of people say they want to dominate on the field or they want to do this until it comes down to those little things we talked about. If you really want to dominate, you'll do all of those things. If it's really important, it's really important.
I like that. So not just dominating the one exercise or the one sport, everything that's related to it.
Yeah, it's detail all the time.
Love that. No one's given that response yet. Thank you so much for tuning into the D8 Training Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Your support means the world to us. It helps us grow and continue bringing value to more people. Until next time, dominate your life.